experiencing technical difficulties. Are we back? We're back. Welcome back. Sorry, we had a little trouble getting the system going again, the stream going again, as we came back from the break. So now is the time in this class when we contemplate and maybe kind of explicitly once again to try and tie up some of the themes of the class. We really tried to structure each of these classes so that we had some study, some contemplation, and some practice. So there was always a reading and some discussion, brief contemplation, and then the caring practices, which you mostly did outside the class. And those are referred to as the three wisdoms. So they're all valid and valuable ways that we engage the Dharma using our different abilities to really nurture a rich sense of the path. So we'll just do a brief contemplation because we're running a little late tonight. And when I was thinking about the 8 aspirations of a great being and trying to figure out what you would contemplate around that, I was reminded that the 4 immeasurables are another one of those visions of what enlightened mind looks like. So it spontaneously manifests loving kindness. Sorry, I have to think about them. The prayer is going through my head, but the labels are not. Loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And equanimity has always been the hardest one for me to build a personal relationship to, so I thought we'd just do a brief contemplation of equanimity tonight. So the classic instruction for contemplating equanimity is to imagine a person you feel neutral toward, then one you love, and then someone who's hostile to you, and see if you can cultivate the same evenness of mind in relation to each of them. And there are some guidelines for doing that. And for me, that always felt like a kind of flattening of my experience, dulling my affection. For some people, ignoring my feelings toward others, especially those who've harmed me. But the goal of equanimity, the goal is not to have a sense of every relationship in our life becoming gray. We want to bring our relationship to every being, those we love, those we have negative feelings toward, those we think we're indifferent to, into a sense of really vivid connection without grasping and without aversion. Indifference, or this kind of what I think of as the grayness, is actually called the near enemy of equanimity. It's the thing that's close to it, but not quite right. And on the other side, our craving and aversion are what Alan Wallace refers to as the far enemy. So if we're holding on to some people and pushing others away, we are far from the state of equanimity. And in his book on the 4 immeasurables, Alan Wallace says something interesting that I think is worth contemplation. He says, all beings yearn for happiness, wishing to be free of suffering just like we do. Different causes and conditions have come together to make them act as they do. A different environment, a different personal history. But all of this is in flux. Had I lived under those same conditions lifetime to lifetime, that would be me. So I think he's really inviting us, instead of trying to raise somebody up and lower somebody down and get everybody on the same level, but just to think, we can picture any being and just think, in other conditions and other circumstances with other causes, that could be me. We are the same. So. So I didn't give you very much time to think about that.
It's true, that was a lightning round.
Sorry. We're running a little late, and we were hoping to get a little feedback at the end about how the class has gone. So,
And this is one of the most challenging contemplations, so try it at home, because it takes a long time to develop a relationship to equanimity, in my experience. Maybe you will find your inner equanimity right off the bat, but on the off chance you don't, it's a nice one to work with. Yeah. So we have our last caring practice, and we can talk about that for a minute. That's going to be familiar to you. Oh, don't come back around.
I'll come back around.
Okay. Take as many as you like, up to the amount that are there.
Thank you.
So when we were talking about this class, Sally and I learned that we both use verses from 8 Aspirations for a Great Being as caring practice, and had done that, which I was surprised. I knew that I had done it, but Sally did it too. So it's hard to remember an entire 8-verse aspiration and carrying it around. But if you break it down, they each kind of have, each stanza has its kind of own little nut. They all point one direction. And really, except for the introductory verse, they'll have a teaching. They'll have a thing you can do. So we picked one. We talked for a long time about which one to print out, and came down to 3, and it was basically like rock, paper, scissors to choose one. So, please work with others. This one is accessible because we see beings around us all the time. So there's food for thought there. And it has this kind of nice dual meaning. If you think of people who are literally hungry or thirsty and literally poor and needy, you'll see fewer of those. But if you think of people who suffer in samsara as hungry and thirsty for the things that they can't get to satisfy their needs. If they're poor and needy of the things that they want to get that satisfies their needs. In a certain sense, we all fit this camp, right? We don't have to be penniless to be poor and needy. So it works on two levels. And then you can think about the juice in this for me, and I'm going to ask Sally to say if this is true for her too. Thinking naturally lavishing upon them the abundance they wish for. This becomes an interesting kind of practice to think about what, people don't just tell you what abundance they want you to lavish on them. So that becomes an active piece of engagement for the person doing the caring practice. How do you relate to that for those last two lines?
Yeah, I relate to it in a similar way. And when I work with this as a caring practice, and I encounter people in my life, I hold this question: what are they hungry for? What are they longing for that I could potentially offer them in this moment? To be seen, to be recognized, to be valued, to be treated with kindness, to make a connection with another human. As Jeff said, there is the really concrete. I'm driving to work and there's a homeless person with a sign right there, and I have money and they don't, and maybe I'll offer something. But I think we encounter hunger, we encounter longing as we go through our days all the time from other people. And so I find myself surrounded by innumerable opportunities to just give them what they want. Just let go and give them what they want, give them what they need. Yeah, and I love the language of it. I don't know who did the translation.
I agree. This is an extremely well-translated prayer.
Yeah, naturally lavish on them the abundance they wish for. I totally relate to that idea from my own side. I can think about the things that I hunger for as I move through the day, especially on a day when I'm having a difficult day or a dark mood, or I'm feeling uncertain or insecure. We can find appetite in ourselves and relate to it in others.
Yeah, you may find that you don't want to give them what they want either, and that's interesting. If it's somebody who seems like they want adulation, and you may feel like you want it or they don't deserve it. So then you have this decision point.
Yeah.
So that's fun.
Yeah.
And you find those, it seems like when you just read it in the abstract, it's very easy. Of course, why wouldn't I do that? And then in front of you, a human is wanting something, and you find that you're not ready to give it up always. So It can be revealing, like so many of these practices we've done.
Yeah. Yeah, you find yourself in a power struggle with somebody about something, and then think, wait, I'm supposed to be naturally lavishing abundance on them, but if they got what they want is what I want. How do I deal with that?
Yeah. And we will not be coming back, so you can just carry this on for the rest of your lives, I guess.
Yeah.
Or until next year.
Yeah. We'll see. And I think this is also, it's a nice example. I mean, a big part of this whole class, I think, was us hoping to encourage people to work with the ultimate, to work with the unbounded view, and really just take it and run with it. And doing something like taking an aspiration prayer, which we know comes right out of the lineage, is something that we can rely on, and just picking a piece and say, okay, today I'm gonna try to carry this. We want to make those moves like that. Linda, you were saying earlier, being in this position where you're at KCC all the time and it's super high engagement, and it really challenges you to figure out, how am I going to carry this practice in this situation? Because the expectation is your whole day is part of a practice community. Each of us ends up having to take personal responsibility for our own path and deciding, yep, I'm going to do this today. I'm going to get up, I'm going to do my formal practice, I'm going to find myself something to read or to contemplate or to carry, and I'm going to find a way to remind myself to do it. And you do end up freelancing a little bit. You know, you want to know that the sources of what you're working with are strong and reliable, but at a certain point you just got to say, okay, I'm gonna work with this. I've got 50 books on my shelf. I'm gonna work with this stanza today. I'm going to remember to work with this. Sorry, blathering.
No, it's good. I think, that's something, the care and feeding series that we've done, we have really hoped, there's this Christian frame which there is a right and a wrong way to do things, and it comes from a book or a person who tells you to do it, and then that's what you do, and if you don't do it right, you're judged externally, and a lot of us can internalize these kind of ways of being, but Buddhism really, there's no judge out there, and at a certain point, if your practice is going to be sustainable and be something that feeds you and carries you along the path, you have to develop your own relationship to it. And so your life changes dramatically over the course of a lifetime. So you need a lot of practices and a lot of different approaches, and you need to find a way to make it work for you. So I think that's exactly right. There was a couple of years ago, I did a thing where I would come to I'd come on Sunday and I would listen to Q&A, and somebody would inevitably say something. One of the teachers, in answering a question, would say something really smart, and I would write it down. And for that week, that would be my carrying practice. So there's just, when you look around the room, everything in Tibetan Buddhism is designed to be a support for the practice, and you're allowed to grab onto whatever is a support to your practice.
Yeah, and we're always really cautious, since this is a practice that's being translated from a different place to our place, a different culture to our culture, to not want to fall in the trap of making up our own path, saying, well, I like that part and I don't like that part, and I read this other cool thing from a different tradition, so I think I'll do a little of that, and before we know it, we've kind of made our Frankenstein path. We're here, we've chosen to engage in this path. We actually want to feel confident that we're on this path, but there are dozens of tools, hundreds of tools that we can use.
So feel empowered to do those things.
This is the first card of the rest of your life.
Well, that raises a lot of things.
Yeah. All right. Well, so does anyone have any questions about this or anything else we've said here? We've just pontificated for about 15 minutes total before we move to wrap up.
Yeah, good.
I was just going to make a comment that I really appreciated in terms of like care and feeding of daily practice. These are, I find them to be very much antidotes, to a lot of the things in my daily life here in this place, in this time, that lead to a lot of confusion and a lot of suffering. These are not teachings that we get very often in the rest of our culture. It's sort of the opposite, actually. Mostly the rest of our culture, mostly the influence I hear is, kick butt and take names and do well, cult of the self And so to have such a profound set of teachings to turn to that are antidotes to that in a rare opportunity in our society is very useful for me in the care and feeding part of it. I mean, we've been referencing a little bit tonight the dominant, culture of Christianity, and even, poor Christianity is there's like the prosperity theology stuff, and it's just been twisted around so badly that, even a lot of this, which is in there too, gets lost these days, I think, and so it's really good to know that there are these beautiful articulations of the teachings, like I say, that I find as valuable antidotes. But anyway, I also want to say I really think you guys did a fantastic job. I really have liked all the classes and all the teachings, and I think you guys obviously went to a lot of effort to be very selective about it. And so, as self-deprecating as you have been, I think you actually did a fantastic job, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
We are aware of things we did wrong in this class, or things we would redo. That this is the third class that we have not done in the past. So this was a bigger stretch for us. We were a little bit further out over our skis on this one. So we seem to be transitioning into that next stage. So anyway, yeah. What?
Yeah, and we are. I don't know. We are always interested in asking at the end of one of these, what were the things that were really the most helpful, that if we were to teach this again, you would want us to absolutely for certain do, and what would you change or improve if you were king or queen of the world, and we're trying to make this class better. Because you never know, there's always a chance we might teach this again.
And we did, and even if we don't teach this exact class, we took the input from the last class and built it into the way we did this one. So it does get carried forward.
It really helps.
Yeah.
So any feedback is welcome.
I appreciated one thing about this class that felt like it was a supplement to what I get when I go to a Sunday shamatha plus Q&A. And it was the way you were willing to answer questions, not by talking about the experiential quality of something, but instead to address, well, this is what various texts say. And this is, what we've read about this, and this is what we've been told. So a little bit more academic rather than experiential. And that's a very nice piece to complement the experiential work that we do on Sundays.
Oh, if only we had the experience to tell you what the nature of mind was like.
Yeah. Yeah, especially with this topic. It has to be, we just can't teach this from the perspective of our own realization.
Yeah.
But you're downplaying what I was saying, which is that there is value to that academic piece, the knowledge in the traditional Western kind of sense that you were able to provide that we don't normally get on Sundays.
Oh.
So thank you.
It's good. It's good to it's good feedback. I think the COGUs are just innately bad at that. We approach things from the practice first, and sometimes we never get to the second part.
Yeah, but sometimes it's so helpful to have the framework. As just putting some structure around how you're going to actually work with it in practice, work with it experientially. So, good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're really interested in what you thought, Michael, since you're so new to this, and we talked before. It'd be really interesting to see what Michael has to say about this.
Well, I would say someone coming in to this center about a month before this class,
Yeah.
you're not going to feel necessarily comfortable with what you bring. I mean, because you're new and you're uncertain and you don't know the faux pas you could unintentionally commit or whatever. I would say you two have created a very comfortable environment for learning about Buddhism, where you're not distracted by extraneous things. You really have a very good balance between what the participants are able to say in assimilation and what you've taught. I never felt like one side dominated the other, and so and the ability of a small number of people still seem to represent a spectrum of all the different ways people come here and pursue Buddhism here, Buddhist practice here. And so probably other people had the feeling that I did often of, oh, that's what the Buddhist practice is. I'm doing something entirely different. But yet it feels like, but I recognize similarities too. And you realize people are here for different reasons. And I thought it was good. You didn't, both of you didn't do too much self-disclosure, but there were times where it was relevant to the point you were trying to make. It was that one night, Sally, where you talked about when you were 16 and just starting to discover Buddhism, and you described it as a discontinuity between heart and mind. And I really liked that because I could identify with that. I thought, oh, she's just provided me with where to place my practice. That's the place to go to, where that border where things are really not congruent with one another, and just sit there and then grow into how they might be. And so that's been that's come back to me like every day. And so I appreciate that blend of personal, to the degree you allowed it, and sort of general philosophy. I thought it was very balanced. I'll miss it on Monday nights. Go back to the pool hall, I guess.
I'm glad you came, Michael. I think it's wonderful, and I think my experience is when we have new people, they ask questions that we all want to ask, because you're new. So why not ask? And it's always beneficial for, I think, everybody, certainly me, to hear somebody new coming to the practice and just talk about that. I was really happy you were in the class.
I really appreciate the conversational kind of style that, and the openness for discussion amongst all of us. Hearing what different people's experiences are, and how different they are. So that's something you don't experience Sunday morning as well, because we're not supposed to give answers. We're supposed to ask questions on Sunday morning. So here we can actually say what our experiences are, and and just how, in such a small group, how varied the different views are and how we use the practice. So it's been really valuable to me, and your longevity in the Dharma practice, and hearing your views and your struggles has been extremely valuable. I wish there was more of this. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, we're not authorities. So you come on a Sunday morning and you ask a question of a teacher, and you're going to get the right answer. And with us, you're going to get like, well, this is how this is what I've heard, this is what I've read, this is how I wrestle with this. This is how this has worked in my own practice. That's what we have to offer. It's just, we've been doing this a long time. We've fallen into a lot of holes. We've dragged ourselves back out of a lot of holes. And we've kept doing it somehow for 20 years. So, and I know throughout my practice career, I have leaned on and relied on people who've been practicing longer than I have, and their advice, and just to hear somebody else's story, I think sometimes has a lightening effect. Like, oh yeah, that's right, everybody struggles with this. I'm not alone. This is not easy. This is easy to understand intellectually and difficult to realize and to manifest. And we're all just on the path together.
Yeah, I think the third object of refuge is Sangha, and it is nice to have these discussions with people in this environment where we're all, as Joe talked about earlier, committed to trying an approach to living and being, which is there may not actually be reflected out there, and work through that. And it's nice to know that there are other people on the path and that you see them and hear them talk and hear them with their experience. So Sally and I think we've said this before. I know we've said it in other classes, but it bears saying again that we also are the massive beneficiaries of this because of what you all say. And so we get to participate in the class too. So thank you for that.
Well, my appreciation to the two of you is enormous. I saw the first one in the streaming, and just the dynamic in between the two of you, the understanding, made me come over. Then that is a big plus. That you walk the path, and you walk a long path already, compared to my half an inch, is also stimulating that is possible. And you make me realize that I have a Frankenstein practice, because I mix a lot of things from the beginning of my life until now. And I learned that I might benefit from more discipline and organization of my studies. Then, thank you.
We've been practicing longer in this life, but maybe this is our first go around. Maybe you've done this hundreds of lifetimes. So maybe you're the real teacher, just waiting to blossom.
Thank you for that.
Well, we're right at 9.
Timing worked out well, even with the streaming hiccup.
That's true.
Must be serendipity.
So tonight we are offering up all of the goodness, not only of this session, but I think of the class as a whole. And I'm having in mind our other stalwarts who weren't able to make it. Susan, who couldn't come for the last couple of sessions, and Mark and Mary Linda, who were traveling. And the truth is, I want to take a class that Mark teaches, because every time he speaks, it's clear he's been doing this a very long time.
Yeah, he's been doing this twice. They've been doing this twice as long as we have. So.
Yeah, and Peter, whose sister passed away, and so he didn't come in from Hood River tonight for the benefit of them and the benefit of all sentient beings.
And when we say this the last time, remember, it says, may we become omniscient. May we do all these things. This is not for somebody else. We have the capacity to accomplish the path. And when we dedicate this, if we have the belief that we have the capacity to accomplish the path, it makes that dedication, we're dedicating something not faulty, not diminished. Yeah. So think of that when you dedicate the merit for this class.
By this merit, may we become omniscient. From this attainment, after defeating evil faults through the endless storm of birth, old age, sickness, and death, may we liberate all beings from suffering in the three worlds. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you for coming, and we really appreciate. One thing I didn't say earlier in my appreciation was I appreciate that the five of you have come throughout the course and stuck with it, didn't just drop in and drop out. So that makes it easier for us to kind of link these classes together. So thank you.